Hey, so in this video we are going to discuss about the syntax of creating functions. Now we have seen in the previous video where we were discussing about a real life example on functions that we can have two different types of function. So the first type of a function is user defined function and the second type of a function is library function. Now the library functions are very simple. They are directly provided to us by C++ programming language. We have rand function which we have used, rand function, which is responsible for generating some random numbers. So that was the library function. So to use library function, what we can do is we can include their library. So to use rand function, if you remember, we had included cstdlib library, and that library contains the rand function. So we are going to discuss about how we can use the library functions and what are the good library functions that are available in C++. But before directly going to the library function, let's first discuss about the user defined function. Now the user defined functions are type of a function which programmers needs to create or programmers need to define. So let's see how we can create our own user defined function or how we can create our own functions. So to create a function, there are three syntactical steps involved, or I would say not to just create. To use a function, there are three syntactical steps involved. So let me quickly list them on the editor. So the first step for using a function is called as function declaration. So before actually using a function or to use a function, first you need to declare a function. Okay, so to create a function or to start using a function, first you need to declare it, right? Then as a second step you need to define that function. So second step is function definition, and the third step is called as function call. So first you declare a function, then you define it, and finally you call it. And when you call it, then actually at that time the function actually executes. Okay, so consider a function as a machine. Okay, now just try to remember what different machine you see around you. So the machine that I want to take as an example for explaining about function is flour mill. So a flour mill is a machine which is used to grind the grains and then it will give us flour out of it, right? So we usually put different type of grain and then we'll get the flour. So each and every machine will, what it will do is it will take some input, it will do some processing on it, and then it will give us some output. So each and every machine will do this stuff, right? It will take input, it will do some processing, and it will give us some output. This is something exactly what functions do. They take some input, they do some processing on that input, and then they give us some output. So what we have to do as a user or as a programmer, first we need to declare it. So we are declaring that we need this machine. So that is called as function declaration. Then you need to define it. In the definition, you exactly are going to explain what exactly that function is going to do inside it or what processing is going to happen. So that is something that you do in function definition. And finally, to actually use it, you are going to call it. Okay, so this is the flow of a function to actually use that function. So let's get quickly started with function declaration. So from the first time, from the first program that we have written in C++, we are using functions. Okay, so every time we write int main, that is nothing but a function. So now it's a time to understand what exactly that int main is. So before discussing about main function, let's start with what is the syntax of creating function, or what is the syntax of function declaration, what is the syntax of function definition, and what is the syntax of function calling. So let's get started with what is the syntax of function declaration. Now to declare any function, you need to follow following syntax. So let's write it over here. So syntax, it's very simple. Okay, it's very simple syntax. So what you have to do, you have to write return type of a function. So I'm going to explain you what is this return type, but you have to write return type of a function, followed by you need to write name of your function, and in parenthesis you need to write type of your inputs to the function. So I will write types list and followed by semicolon. Okay, so it's quite easy. See, what is the syntax? You have to write return type of the function, then you have to write name of the function, and then you have to write type list of your inputs. Okay, so let's take an example. Let's say I want to create a function which will add two numbers. So I want to create a machine which will take two inputs, and as a processing step it will add those two inputs and then it will give me the result of their addition. So I want to create such type of function. So let's see how we can declare this function. So what is going to be input for our function? The input is going to be two numbers. Now what is going to be type of your input? So either it's going to be int or it's going to be float. So for our example, let's consider that we are going to supply two inputs of integer type. Okay, so let's see what is going to be syntax. So let's say name of my function is going to be add. Okay, and the two inputs that I'm going to supply to this function are going to be of type integer. Okay, so the type is going to be, or the syntax is going to look something like this. So I'm writing add, and in bracket I'm writing int comma int, because these are the type list of my input. So I have two inputs, that's why I'm writing int comma int. So these are two inputs. First input is of type int and second input is also of type int. Now what is this return type? As I said, this function, what it is going to do, it is going to take two numbers and it is going to add them, and after adding them it is going to return us the addition. So as it is going to return us the addition, what is going to be the type of the value that is getting returned by this function? It's again going to be integer, because if we add two integers then the answer is also going to be an integer number. So that's why the return type of this function is going to be int. So this is function declaration for add function. Let me again quickly explain you how you declare any function. You have to first write a return type of the function. Now what is going to be return type? So let's again discuss about the machine example. In case of machine, the machine is going to give you some output. In case of flour mill, it's gonna be flour. Okay, in case of our add machine which we are creating, it's going to be addition of the two inputs that we are supplying to it, right? So the return value or the return or the output of our function is going to be of which type? If the inputs are of integer type, it's going to be of integer type, because if we add two integers, the addition is going to be integer. So the return type in this case is going to be int. Then you need to write name of your function. So I'm writing name as add, and then you need to, in brackets, you need to provide the list of types of your input. So let's say this function is taking two inputs of integer type. So I'm writing int comma int. So this is how you declare any function. Let's say you want to add three numbers. Okay, so you want to create a function which will add three numbers. So how you will create it, or how you will declare it? So let's say you want to write a function which will add three floating point numbers. Okay, now what is going to be result of addition of three floating point number? It is going to be float. So this function that you are going to create is going to return float value, because the output of the function is going to be float. Okay, so let me write the return type as float. Then you have to write name of the function. So let me write name of the function as add. Now we have already used add as the name of a function previously, so we can't use it again. So we need to write some different name. So let me write add three floats. Okay, so this is name of my new function, and this function will take three inputs of type float. So I'll write float, comma float, comma float. Okay, now let's say you have to define a function for flour mill. How it will look? So it will look like this. The return type of that is going to be flour, because it will return you flour as output. Then the name of the function is going to be flour mill, and the input type is going to be some whole grains. So this is how the flour mill function will look, right? We don't have any data type as flour and whole grains, that's why it is showing us the error. But this is how you have to declare any function. So I hope you are very clear with the syntax. Return type, then name of the function, and then inputs, input list. Now I have one thing to explain over here. So let's say I want to write a function to just print one line. Just print one line, okay? So let's say I want a function to print hello world. Just to print hello world. So such function don't really need any input because its work is just to print hello world, right? So for such functions, we can skip passing the argument, or we really don't need any argument. Another thing, there can be a function which don't really give any output to us, okay, which don't really give some value back to us. So in such scenarios, the function can have void as its return type, okay? So function can have void as its return type, and if we give void as a return type to a function, that means function will not give back anything to us, or function does not return anything to us. Okay, so let's take an example. I'm declaring a function with the return type as void. Let me name it as print line, and this function is not going to take any input. Okay, so I want to create this function just to print hello world on screen. Okay, so this function will be responsible for printing hello world on screen. This function will be responsible for adding 3 floats, and this function will be responsible for adding 2 integers and giving back their addition as output, right? Cool. So this function is responsible for adding 2 integers and giving back their addition as the output. This function is responsible for adding 3 floats and giving back their addition as output. And this function, that is print line, is responsible for just printing hello world on the screen. It is not going to give back anything as the output. Now you may say, printing hello world on the screen, is it not an output? Now by output of a function, I mean it should give us some value in return. So the value can be either int, float, char, or something else, but it needs to give back some value in return. We are going to see how we can return a value from a function. But if a function don't really need to return anything, so such type of functions can have void as the return type. And by void return type, we mean that function does not return anything. Okay, so I hope you have understood how we can declare a function in C++. So in next video, we are going to see how we can define a function in C++.